What's up, everybody? I want to talk to you tonight about a very familiar story, and it can be found in John chapter 11. But I want to kick this off by asking a real question. What do you do when God doesn't show up when you thought he would? What do you do when you've prayed, believed the word, and what you were praying about still died? Because there are moments in life when things don't just look bad. They're dead. And not maybe dead, slightly dead, not quite dead. They're dead, dead. They've been dead long enough that they start to stink. If you've ever been there, well, this story I want you to follow. It's in John chapter 11, as I mentioned, because this story is for people who are standing at the grave, wondering where God was. The Bible says that Lazarus gets sick. He's not dead yet. He's just sick. And his sisters, Mary and Martha, they do the right thing. They send for Jesus. And I want you to watch how the word describes Lazarus, or how they describe Lazarus. They don't say, "Our brother is sick." They say, "Lord, the one you love is sick." And I want you to understand why that line is so significant and why that line matters. They're saying, Jesus, this isn't a random. This isn't distant. This is personal. And some of us are praying about things that we love, not hobbies, not preferences, but things that are tied to our hearts. Now, here's where it gets real. The Bible says that Jesus loved Lazarus. He loved Mary and Martha. And then it says this. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed where he was. That's John 11, 5 and 6. And I want you to let that sit in because I let it sit with me today. And actually had a totally different message that I was going to uh to minister tonight. And I started meditating on this on a walk. So I want you to let that sit. Jesus heard, he knew, and he loved them. And he waited anyway. So I want you to hear me clearly. You listening? Just because God heard you does not mean he will hurry for you. I want that to sit. I want that to, I want you to sit with that. Just because God heard you does not mean he will hurry for you. In our human nature, we think that love equals speed. But in the kingdom, love doesn't rush. It redeems. And sometimes God waits because he loves you. Because if he shows up too early, you'll never know him as the resurrection and the life. So I want to paint this picture for you because by the time Jesus shows up, Lazarus is dead. Jesus waited 4 days. He wasn't quiet dead. He wasn't fresh dead. He was stinking dead. And Martha, his sister, runs out to Jesus in verse 21, and she says, "Lord, if you had only been here." Here's the translation for that. You were late. And hear this. You can love God and still be disappointed with his timing. I'm going to say that again. You can love God and still be disappointed with his timing. Some of us have buried things that we've prayed over, dreams, relationships, callings, faith. And now it doesn't just look dead, it actually smells dead. So Jesus, I always pictured Jesus. He's so smooth. And he goes to the tomb and says, take away the stone. And Martha, then she says the realest line in this chapter. She says, Lord, by the way, if you roll that stone away, we're going to be in for it because it stinks. I want you to understand that that's not theology. That's just reality. She's saying, Jesus, if we open this, it's going to smell. Let me say this clearly. Some things don't just seem dead, they smell dead. Time has passed, decay has set in, evidence is loud, and that's exactly where God likes to work. Now, I want you to understand that this is the moment. Jesus stops everything and he says, did I not tell you? Didn't I tell you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? Because Jesus is not talking about belief after the miracle. He's talking about belief before the miracle. See, we as humans, we get it backwards. We say, God, show me and I'll believe. Jesus says, believe me and I'll show you. I want you to notice this. Jesus does not say, if Lazarus comes out. He says, if you would believe, the condition was never the miracle. The condition was belief. Now, I want you to hear this because belief is not pretending it doesn't stink. Belief is saying, God, I smell it, but I still trust you. Belief is not denying death. Belief is standing at a grave and still expecting the glory of God to fall. Jesus is saying, Martha, I already told you, but you let the smell talk louder than my word. And that's us, man. Jesus doesn't say to us, you'll see Lazarus alive. He says you'll see the glory of God. Because sometimes the miracle is bigger than what you lost. Sometimes what happens to us is the longer that something stays dead, the louder that we allow doubt to creep in. What we do is we start rewriting what God already said based on how bad it smells. But Jesus didn't say you'll see Lazarus alive. Jesus said you'll see the glory of God. Because sometimes the miracle, as I said, is bigger than what we lost. And if Jesus healed Lazarus early, guess what? We would have said, wow, he loved him. That's compassion. But because he waited, they got to see the power, authority, and his dominion over death. Sometimes God waits until it stinks so nobody gets credit but him. And we get to see Jesus cry out with a loud voice. In John 11:43, he says, Lazarus, come forth. And what was dead walks out. Not patched up, not improved, but resurrected. Dead, stinking, 4 days late. I want you to turn to somebody and say, but God. How many of us have ever had a but God moment? I have. So Lazarus comes out alive, but guess what? He's still wrapped up. And what that tells me is just something so powerful. Resurrection and freedom doesn't always happen at the same time. You can be alive again and still healing, alive again and still unwrapping. And Jesus says, loose him and let him go. God raises the dead, and the community removes the grave clothes. Come on, somebody. That's why church matters. That's why community matters. That's why it's important to not forsake the fellowship of the brethren. Come on, somebody. Some of you are watching this standing at a tomb. Something you prayed over has died. Something you loved stinks now. Something feels beyond revival. But I want you to hear me. Dead things stay dead until God shows up. Dead things stay dead until God shows up. The delay doesn't stop him. The stink doesn't stop him. The grave doesn't stop him. Even now, but God. I want you to say that. Even now, but God. And I want you to let God show you his glory. Even now, but God. God bless you, everybody.